Welcome, friends, it's the MovieFilm Podcast. MovieFilm Podcast, enjoy the show. Zachy and Brian are talking about the movies. MovieFilm Podcast on the radio.
Stardate 8097.3.
Now, Scott.
On June 1st, Admiral James T. Kirk and the crew of the Enterprise take off on their greatest mission as they risk everything for the one thing that really matters, to find their friend. Join the search. Star Trek III, The Search for Spock, rated PG.
Welcome to a movie film commentary track. My name is Zachy Hassan. I'm here with Brian Hall.
Hey, how's it going, Zachy?
You know, it's going well. I woke up this morning and I decided, Brian, I want to embark on a search today.
A search, Zachy?
Yeah. A search, one might say, for Spock.
It's the way, I don't know, the pattern of that made me think of, let's take a look into the future. The
future Conan?
The Search for Spock. You know, I didn't realize this came out in 1984, by the way. When I was doing the research, I didn't realize this was a part of that sort of epic summer with Temple of Doom, Gremlins, Ghostbusters, all of that.
It was a good summer. Yeah, it's just, you know, a couple of years ago, we watched The Wrath of Khan on here in service of that movie's 40th anniversary. And I thought, you know, we should just dip back in every couple of years and at least complete this little trilogy, the Star Trek trilogy.
Absolutely, yeah.
You know, and so, yeah, Star Trek III, The Search for Spock, celebrated its 40th anniversary earlier this year. And I say, you know, as I want to do, I kind of grabbed Brian by the ear and was like, hey, watch Star Trek with me, Brian. He's going, fine.
You know what's funny, though? That is true, because I didn't really grow up on these, although I did see 4 in the theater and really loved it. But you have been like, check out this one. We'll check out the next one. And it's made me realize, even though I haven't really watched the series, I really like the Star Trek films. You know, they're not like alternate universe Star Wars movies. They are completely different tempos and tones and even philosophies. And like, I love them for that, you know?
Well, I certainly love hearing that. And that's how I have felt, you know, these last, 40 years, really, because whenever I feel the urge, you know, I pop on one of these original 6 movies and visit my friends on the Enterprise.
Yeah.
And that's how I always feel. And Star Trek 3 is an interesting one because, you know, I don't know if you're familiar. There is the odd even curse of Star Trek.
Oh, yes, you're right. I've heard of that.
Where people say, oh, the even numbered ones are great and the odd number ones are not so great. And I've always felt, well, I don't know that Star Trek 3 really fits into that necessarily. I don't think it's as good as the one before it or the one after it, but I think it's an enjoyable little romp. I
had the exact same feeling. Even I didn't know that when I first saw it. And as I was watching 2, 3, and 4, I was like, well, I like all of these.
Well, I feel like it's been sort of awkwardly retrofitted to fit the meme, you know?
Sure.
But I would respectfully disagree, and I have a feeling a lot of people listening to this would disagree as well too. So hey, let's cue it up and get ready to go. Warp engines at the ready, one might say.
Yep.
Let's take a short break and let the sponsors do their thing, and then after that we will come back and watch Star Trek 3. And we are back and ready to go. I'm queued up on you and on my end. How about you, Brian?
I'm queued up.
All right. Well, we'll do the usual thing. If you want to watch along with us, you certainly can. We will hit play on 3. 1, 2, 3, play. Of course, if you don't want to watch along with us, hopefully our conversation will be interesting enough to keep you company on your drive or your jog or whatever it is you happen to be doing. So here we go. Let's do this. 1, 2, 3, play.
You know, it's kind of cool. At the Academy Museum in Los Angeles, they have that Paramount cutout that they used.
Oh, how funny!
Opening logo, that sort of the painting version before it turns blue.
Yeah.
And it's such a little thing, and it's on the wall in a corner, and I was like, that's amazing. Like I've seen that thing so many times in front of so many classic movies. That's so cool to see it in person.
So as we said, this came out summer of '84. So between Temple of Doom and The Search for Spock, Paramount did okay that summer.
Yeah, I want to say it made 16 million in its opening weekend in 1984 money. That's amazing.
Not too shabby, and these movies were budgeted far lower than your normal summer blockbusters. Smartly, it had a budget of 16 million.
Yeah,
and so when all of a sudden done, $87 million it made at the box office, which that's a clear win.
Absolutely.
And that's what puzzles me about Paramount's current paralysis with regards to Star Trek movies, because I'm like, you don't need a massive blockbuster budget to tell a compelling Star Trek story, as these films showed. The Paramount machine was cranking these out throughout the 1980s and 90s. I mean, there were something like 8 movies came out between those 2 decades.
Right.
It's amazing.
Well, and look, I saw Star Wars first. Star Wars is my thing. And I love Star Wars for the energy it brings and the types of stories and storytelling and action and whatnot. But especially after watching this last night, I was like, oh, I totally see the J.J. Abrams Star Trek and everyone going, oh, he just made Star Wars. Because what I loved about this is, there's a moment, like a standoff at the middle of this movie.
Yeah.
And it's all about the tension.
That's right.
It's not about the dazzle, it's and that's what's its strength. That's why these movies feel different, and that's what they have going for them, in my opinion, as being a different thing than Star Wars. And so to your point, absolutely make, of course it's going to be bigger than this film, probably with special effects and whatnot these days, but like, you don't have to go full tilt with that. Like, you can still lean into the standoffs and the tensions and everything that this classic Star Trek brings. I think I would love to watch something like that.
Well, you're not alone. I think Chris Pine has said something similar, where he said, look, Star Trek has never been that, it's about the characters. So he's acutely aware of that.
Yeah.
And to that point, I mean, this is a film that was greenlit within months of The Wrath of Khan coming out. It was before the summer of '82 was done. There was like, Star Trek 3 is going to happen, and they very quickly wanted to get their ducks in a row. Obviously, if you look at the casting here, you get William Shatner, and then there's a noticeable gap before we go to DeForest Kelley.
Yeah, I read about that. That's really interesting.
Almost, they assumed audiences would be kind of leaning forward, like, is his name in the credits?
Right. Yeah. I didn't even think about that as like sort of a little tease.
Now, of course, it is directed by Leonard Nimoy. It's the first film he directed. He went on to do the next one, and he did 3 Men and a Baby, and was able to get a second career off of the back of his work on this movie. And I'm constantly amused by how Leonard Nimoy was acutely aware of the combative relationship he had with Spock. In the 1970s, he wrote a book called "I Am Not Spock," and then, of course, later on in life, in the late 1990s, he wrote a sequel called "I Am Spock." So, and I think famously, he was convinced to do the second movie. He did not want to do the second movie because he felt like it was squeezing blood from the stone. And Harve Bennett, the producer, kind of lured him by saying, what if we gave you like a really great death scene? And so that kind of got him on board. And then he ended up having a great experience making that movie.
It's funny. I can imagine when I Am Not Spock came out.
Oh, by the way, real quick.
Yeah.
Ralph Winter, if I'm not mistaken, didn't he come and talk at your college, Biola?
Yes. Yeah. He had a relationship with the school, and he would come out often and sort of mentor people and do, talks and things. And he was, the little interaction I had with him, he's a very nice guy.
Yeah. I believe this was his first film. He went on to work on the X-Men films, etc.
Yeah. At the time, that was the thing where we're like, holy crap. He's doing
sorry, you were saying that. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No. I can imagine being a Star Trek fan in the 70s, and it would be maybe disappointing or disheartening hearing him be like, I'm not Spock, please. But then there's something about being in 2024 where you can see the totality of it, and it's understandable. It's a human thing to see him wrestling with it. And so you can read I am not Spock as a document of a moment in time, and then I am Spock as another document of another moment in time, which is understandable with it, as we now have all these years for him to fall back in love with the character, or at least what it means to his life. And so,
Right.
you know what I mean?
And certainly, no, I think you're absolutely right. And I think certainly by the end of his life, he was acutely aware that Spock was his legacy. Spock is his legacy. And the character lives on without him. You know, there's the Zachary Quinto version, there's the Ethan Peck version on the television show that's on right now. But
Right.
they're all playing aspects of Leonard Nimoy when you think about it.
Sure.
But regardless, when it came to making the film, by the way, I like the little right before the credits where we get essentially the previously on Star Trek, right?
I love it. It's very like you could just show clips almost as like a little sizzle reel kind of thing. Like, remember this? Like, or previously on. But it's the way they do it where it starts as a little rectangle in the middle of the screen and slowly comes at you. It's sort of haunting. And
and lovely
stirring.
music by James Horner, of course, that really helps.
I think it's a beautiful way to remind people where we last were, because this is probably before the days when most people had VCRs and things like that.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
Yeah.
So it comes time to make the sequel. Paramount announces it, and Leonard Nimoy was like, "I'm probably going to be getting the call." Right? He's like, "I don't know for certain." You know, he even said like, the way it goes, you know, that you could the tube on Genesis could open up, and there could be like a little 8-year-old boy. He's like, "Hey, I'm Spock," and that's it, right? So it didn't mean they would necessarily call him, but he had a fair amount of certainty, and indeed they did. So at that point, he says, "Well, what can I do to maximize the leverage I have here?" And he was like, maybe use Star Trek 3 as a way to like, okay, I'll do this, but I want you to fund this movie I want to do. But instead he was like, I'm going to ask to direct it.
Yeah.
And, you know, kind of brilliant when you think about it. It's, you know, I recorded a commentary track for this film with Glenn Greenberg a couple years back. And I made the point that his point of maximum leverage was right now, because they had never done a Star Trek without Leonard Nimoy. So let's say they do this and he's not involved. And like, wait, we don't need Leonard Nimoy.
Yeah, it works.
Right?
Or they're just fine. Yeah,
that will be fine. So that was his point. And the key thing, was he willing to let the party go on without him? He was. And they said, okay, well, and the studio was initially on board, and then they were hesitant, because they're like, oh, you had it in your contract that Spock had to die. He's like, no, I didn't have it in my contract. And that became a whole thing.
Yeah, I was reading about that. It's like him and Michael Eisner, right?
Yeah,
sort of which is weird, because I it's always fascinating to me reading about Michael Eisner, because he's just the guy who introduced movies on Sunday nights for the wonderful world of Disney.
That's right. Yeah.
But, you know, knowing he was at Paramount and his crazy relationship with Jeffrey Katzenberg, and you're like, the more I learned about him, it's kind of fascinating.
Yeah, the sort of executive musical chairs that were played at Paramount throughout the 70s and 80s are sort of fascinating as it pertains to Star Trek, because it's a weird thing, because Star Trek was kind of this dependable utility player throughout throughout those decades. I don't know where it sits now in terms of their priorities, but I mean even now there's like multiple Star Trek shows in production. So clearly it's an important part of their, you know, their toolkit. I
mean, for something that was made this low budget and to make $87 million in 1984.
Yeah.
I mean, what an awesome tool in your belt.
It really is.
Yeah.
So Christopher Lloyd here, but on the right, that's John Larroquette.
Dude, I had no idea till this morning when I was reading about it. Amazing.
Yeah, you could. I mean, like Lloyd, you can tell he's got them Doc Brown crazy eyes.
Yeah, and that voice. Oh my gosh, that voice is incredible.
He's so fun in this movie. I really like Christopher Lloyd in this.
An incredible villain. I mean, he's just and it's funny because he is obviously Doc, and he's, you know, Judge Doom, and well, I was just gonna say, I mean, he's one of those people, you know exactly who he is, but I think he distinguishes himself here, and he, of course, in Roger Rabbit, he distinguishes himself, doesn't feel like Doc at all. So for someone who is so immediately identifiable, it's kind of amazing he's able to do that.
That's such a good point. Yeah.
I love
Yeah, I mean,
his dog, by the way. Sorry, it just that ugly little dog. It's just like a nice little bit of business,
that's right.
to make it the world feel just that much more lived in.
So Christopher Lloyd was Leonard Nimoy's second choice, and he was because he wanted Edward James Olmos.
Which I can imagine.
I can absolutely. That would be a very different version of this.
Yep.
But the studio pushed for Christopher Lloyd. I think it worked out fine because, like I said, I like Christopher Lloyd as his character. Commander Krug is his name, and he's very different from the Klingons that we would see later on. This is by way of context. Once the Next Generation series started, which was about 3 years removed from this, and that had Michael Dorn as Worf.
Right.
And he's, you have a Klingon who's in Starfleet and he's very honorable and decent. And so we got this over the course of that series, we got this deep dive into Klingon culture. Right. And it marked a shift from the way the Klingons were portrayed in the original show, where they were essentially, the Russians, during the Cold War.
Mm-hmm.
And so to me, Christopher Lloyd in this movie is kind of the last spark of those old timey, just nasty son of a bitch Klingons like we used to have.
Totally. Yeah, but Edward James almost would bring sort of a quieter sense of menace or something to it. I can imagine. But yep. Christopher Lloyd just pops off the screen.
He just Christopher Lloyd's it up.
Yep. Yeah, and so this would have come out probably when they were filming Back to the Future.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah. This is 1 year before that. This is pre-med for Christopher Lloyd.
Yeah. It's a fun little trivia bit just because we're already done with the Back to the Future commentaries, and I don't remember if I mentioned this, but you can see when he's in the parking lot doing the demonstration for Marty wearing the radiation suit, he has a little notepad that's sticking out of his pocket that has a Gremlins cover to it.
Oh, how funny.
So if they were shooting that in 84, that's probably, if you walked into a drugstore, that's
makes sense.
The little notepad you probably would have seen, like a little Gremlins notepad.
That's really funny.
Yeah.
So the Excelsior, the ship here, I think initially, if I were to guess, the plan was that since we scuttle the Enterprise in this movie, we'll eventually just move. Oh, by the way, that's Grace Lee Whitney right here.
Yeah, who is that? She looks so familiar.
Well, she was a character on the original show. So she's Commander Rand. On the original series, she was Yeoman Rand. And so they put her there. They give her a little featured close up because the fans would recognize her. She was a regular in the first half of the first season of the original series. Kind of set up as like a love interest for Kirk, but it didn't really. I don't think it worked out the way they wanted.
Obviously they put some attention on her, so I was thinking, oh wait, who's that? I don't remember who that is, but I love that that's just a little fan service there,
just for the fans. Yeah. So I think the plan was probably okay. Now, once the Enterprise is done, we're gonna move the crew over to the Excelsior. And that's something that there was a DC comic book series which was running concurrently with this, and they were telling stories set in between the movies. Which seems, you wouldn't really do that anymore. You know what I mean?
Right, yeah.
Like, okay, well, Star Trek 3 has come out. Now we're just going to tell a bunch of stories until Star Trek 4 comes out. Now it's like, well, everything has to fit together. So the comic books actually did that. But fans were not happy, obviously, about the Enterprise getting destroyed. And this was another thing that I think Gene Roddenberry, I think we mentioned in our Wrath of Khan track how he was shoved to the side. He was a creative consultant, which is basically a corner office and a paycheck and to be ignored, basically.
Well, just as a real quick recap, if he's the creator of the show and his name is still, I'm not even a huge Star Trek guy, and I know Roddenberry. Why is that? Like, at what point what was he doing, and at what point was he sort of given that office and said, "Here, please stay in here."
Stay here. Yeah. So, after the original show went off the air, of course, it was a cult favorite virtually immediately. And so Gene Roddenberry was the one who was, showing up at college campuses and conventions and being like, we're trying to bring it back. And then all of that eventually led up to Star Trek, the motion picture, the first film, which came out in 1979. And that started out as a it was going to be a television show, and then it was rejiggered as a movie, and basically there was it was a whole chaotic process that ended up seeing the budget just rise and rise and rise. So this is a movie that came out in 1979, and it cost $44 million, right? In 1979 dollars,
Wow. Yeah.
right? And it ended up making 140 million.
Wow. Okay.
So massive hit due to just Star Trek fans being like, well, I'm going to watch it. And this is a new Star Trek. I'm going to go see it again. Even if I don't like it that much, I'm going to watch it again.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the reason they came back and said, we're going to do sequels, because it did so well.
Mm-hmm.
But basically it was like, we're going to do sequel. It's going to be cheaper.
Mm-hmm.
And Gene Roddenberry will not be involved because he was blamed for the budget overruns.
Got it.
And so Harv Bennett was brought over from the TV side, and with Wrath of Khan, in the conceptual stage, they didn't even know if it would be theatrical. That maybe it'll be a TV movie.
Wow.
Ended up, of course, being theatrical. Thank goodness for that.
Mm-hmm.
There was no streaming to ruin it back then. Streaming would have probably,
It definitely would have done it. Yeah.
But so at that point, Harv Bennett had proved his mettle, and Roddenberry had essentially, he had been sidelined himself.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Nicholas Meyer, who directed and wrote the previous film, was asked to come back. He did not want to come back, not because he didn't want to be associated with Star Trek. I think he had objections to bringing Spock back, and he even said, I don't do resurrections.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
And so that's why Leonard Nimoy was like, well, hey, you guys need a director. I'm solving a problem for you.
Uh-huh.
And it's like, all right, well, I think you're solving a problem for yourself too.
Sure. But it's amazing when we were talking about that earlier, and he didn't have a lot of experience, but you watch this movie and it is very well directed. I think, like, you would never know this was someone's first movie.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it helps that this is an ensemble that they know each other very well. So they had all developed probably a shorthand amongst each other.
Sure.
It also helps that he didn't have to build the world from the ground up. The familiar elements of the Star Trek universe already existed. And if anything, Leonard Nimoy is well positioned to be sort of the intermediary between the studio and the fans when you think about it.
Yeah, sure.
Right? Because I mean, who knew this stuff better than him? I mean, he had been attending conventions. He knew it,
Sure.
And so Harv Bennett has said that the film itself was something that was very easy to write. I mean, he's the sole credited writer on this, and essentially it was just a matter of, well, we know we got to end up with Spock coming back, so we just work our way backwards from there. I would offer that it's a little too straightforward. Because it's I say this jokingly. I'm like, well, when you call the movie The Search for Spock, it's not going to end with them not finding him,
Sure.
So we're just going through preordained paces until we get to the ending that we know is happening anyway.
Sure, totally.
Right. I mean, Leonard Nimoy's directing the thing. I think, it's like I'm putting myself in the head of audiences back then. I'm like, the twist would be if Spock doesn't come back. Nope, sorry, we didn't find him,
I do love, though, that there's it's not as straightforward as just having him in the box like, I'm back, in his fully grown form. Like, it's an interesting idea having him rapidly age on this planet that's rapidly aging and decaying, and it just feels like an extra step that's kind of interesting.
Yeah. I think that, and I say this a lot. I mean, the end of the Wrath of Khan, the death of Spock, remains 40 plus years later. It's so effective. It's so dramatic. It's so emotional, and it remains so even knowing there's like 4 more movies coming out, or 6 more movies coming out that are going to feature Leonard Nimoy as Spock, right?
Right.
And that's the test of a great story, that even the later context does nothing to diminish it.
Absolutely.
But I do wonder how audiences, certainly Star Trek audiences, how they how we're like, hey, don't bring back Tony Stark. That would diminish the death in Endgame.
Right.
Did they feel that way about bringing Spock back?
Yeah, that's a good Good
Right?
question. Because when you were saying Myers was saying I don't do resurrections, it's like, well, you're not going to get to make movies now in the 21st century because that's all they do is
That's
kill
right.
characters and bring them back. You know what I mean?
That's right.
So, but yeah, I guess maybe it wasn't as frequent a thing. So did it feel unique in the way that it was executed, or did it feel like a cop out?
That's I genuinely I'm curious about that. You know,
I was reading that this is just a redressed Enterprise bridge set.
Yeah, they did that a lot. Like they did the same thing with the Reliant in the previous movie.
I love it though how simple it is with just changing the color of the chairs, like putting a different sort of chair cover on it. It's a different color, but I didn't know. I didn't think about it till I read the trivia later.
Totally works.
Yeah, smart.
So this is Robin Curtis as Lieutenant Savick replacing Kirstie Alley.
Mm-hmm.
Kirstie Alley, for whatever reason, did not have a sequel clause in her contract. So she could hold him up for more money. I don't think she wanted to come back. That's my sense.
What is she doing about this time? Because I mean,
this is pre Cheers.
Pre Cheers, right?
Yeah, because Cheers would have been like 86, 87.
Mm-hmm.
So, what I've heard is that she had not great experiences with certain people on the earlier film, and she just didn't want to be part of it again.
Okay.
I don't know. So she basically she's like, if you want me to come back, give me this much, and it was like a ridiculous amount that she knew they would say, well, we're not doing that.
Right.
I think Robin Curtis is fine, but she doesn't. I just think Kirstie Alley is better.
Yeah, it's maybe because I'm more familiar with her, but there is something about, I don't know if it's even just her face or whatever made her a movie star. Just that little spark that only she can bring. Yeah, like Robin Curtis is totally fine. Yeah,
and I think the character as created in the original film was at least alluded to being half Vulcan, half Romulan. I think with this film, Leonard Nimoy told Robin Curtis just play her as a full Vulcan. And so that comes across in her portrayal.
Yeah, very matter of fact, I guess. Especially when she delivers some news later.
Yeah, right, exactly. That's exactly it. Yeah, and you would have liked to see Kirstie Alley deliver that,
Mm-hmm.
Just because of the history that we have with that version of the character,
Right.
Now, this is really one of the few times in these films that we see the characters out of their duty uniforms, and Chekhov's pink jumpsuit always cracks me up.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, it's like Captain Kirk in his sort of like Sopranos
That's
velvet,
right.
jogging suit.
It's so funny. It's like, what does 23rd century casual wear look like?
Right.
It's like New Jersey chic.
Yeah. Yes.
So Mark Leonard here as Sarek, he originated the role on the television series in an episode called Journey to Babel. He also voiced Sarek in an episode of the animated series in the early 70s. So he was pretty fully associated with the role.
Yeah.
But in addition to appearing in this film, he would come back in Star Trek 4 and also in Star Trek 6. And he was also in 2 episodes of The Next Generation as Sarek. So that was one thing I always really liked about Star Trek, is maintaining consistency with actors across the television show into the even the spin-off shows.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and from his point of view, find yourself a franchise,
right?
Just have them keep bringing you back, and they're gonna make a cartoon. Great, just a steady paycheck throughout the years.
Well, in addition, by the way, worth mentioning, Mark Leonard, he also played a Romulan in the original television series, and he was also a Klingon in the first feature film. So he benefited from a Jeopardy question, which is which actor has played the 3 major alien roles on Star Trek.
Huh. How funny.
Or rather, this actor has played, and then you would say, who is Mark Leonard?
Yeah.
Also, as a Planet of the Apes fan, I should mention Mark Leonard was the primary antagonist on the Planet of the Apes television series, General Urko.
Wow. So you were familiar with a lot of his work.
I clearly am. This scene, I love this scene.
Yeah.
The way Shatner plays it, the way Horner's music comes in, and we get this new orchestration of the Spock theme, and this begins Kirk's sort of call to action of like he has to do something, and just the emotion as Kirk is reliving his last moments with Spock.
I was thinking about when I was watching this last night, like this is like the best of what sci-fi can bring. You know what I mean? Like I've told some people like I really love ghost stories because they're sort of like wish fulfillment. Like what if I could spend a little more time with someone that I've lost, or what if something that you didn't
look at that right there. Look at how Kirk's eyes just
yeah.
shift. Oh, it's beautiful.
But you know what I mean? Like we're getting to re-experience this certain emotion and re-understand like a connection that Kirk has with Spock. This, Spock's dad is learning things in this moment. We're also learning like there's a way to bring him back through this unique sort of thing only sci-fi can bring. Like and it's not, the spectacular razzle dazzle kind of thing. It's very quiet, but it's spectacular ideas.
That's such a great point, right? And really, like, it gets to something we talk about often, which is, the elastic reality of the cinematic environment, right? Like the audience will believe what you tell them to believe if you make it credible within that world.
Yeah.
Right. And the notion of the mind meld. I love how the mind meld came about, which is, in the original series, they had to get some information from some guy about a thing, and they were gonna interrogate him and get whatever piece of information they could get, and Leonard Nimoy is like, well, hey, wait a minute, why don't we do like some kind of a mind thing? And it's like, hey, okay, Vulcan mind meld,
and everybody knows what that is now. That's like
right.
It's great.
It's kind of the same as the Vulcan neck pinch that started with a Spock was supposed to use the butt of his phaser to knock a guy out. And he's like, that doesn't seem like something Spock would do. How about this?
It's more elegant.
It's more elegant, exactly. So you realize like so much of the Vulcan cultural affect and everything else, it came from Leonard Nimoy and these ideas. So that's why, he really gets to own the affection that people have for the character in the world.
I love that. And specificity is what makes people like things. Because right? It's not just repeating things we've seen before.
Yep. Well, as Nicholas Meyer has said in his commentary track for the previous film, in specificity, you find universality.
Yeah.
I think it's very convenient that the Enterprise security cameras are matched up exactly with the footage from the previous film.
It is almost like Spaceballs, where he's like,
I was going to say,
Star Trek 2.
We're in now.
Yeah, exactly. And even like the sort of, obviously this is an 84, but it's like the analog sort of fast forwarding and rewinding of
right.
But I do love that in movies where they're like, oh, here's the security footage, and it's from these dynamic angles, and there's editing involved. And,
that always cracks me up.
Yeah.
So that right there, when Spock does the remember gesture on McCoy, again, that there was no grand design, there was no plan.
Really?
This was Harv Bennett while they're making the earlier film, who says, he goes to Leonard Nimoy. He's like, can you do something, just something that like gives us a storyline, maybe something. What would Spock do in that moment? And he's like, how about I just say remember?
Incredible.
Isn't that crazy?
It's incredible because it's so mysterious. And I love it. I mean, you could, I don't know. I just think that it's amazing that came out of almost just improvise something that could be interesting later. And it's just so perfect and haunting and cool.
Yeah.
And intriguing.
It's amazing. Yeah,
remember,
that's how creativity
it could be so many things.
Yeah. You just, and it's literally just, well, give us a thread.
Yep.
That we can come back to or not later. Now, there is a plot problem here that came about because they moved around the certain exposition scenes in the film. So here's the logic problem. When the Grissom finds Spock's coffin,
Mm-hmm.
they're surprised that it survived reentry. Right? It was supposed to burn up on reentry.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that his coffin is there is a surprise. However, Sarek is upset that Kirk didn't bring his body back, right? Kirk is like, I have to go get his body, but he doesn't know, as far as he knows, Spock's body doesn't exist.
You're right, because that's essentially to put it in screenwriting terms, the call to adventure for Kirk that has to happen in the first act to motivate him to cross the threshold.
There you go. You got it.
Yeah.
So
Fascinating.
there's a reason for that, and the movie was originally supposed to start with the Grissom discovering Spock's coffin,
which is an intriguing opening. I can see that.
Yeah, and then we go to the Enterprise, and Kirk in his captain's log even says something to the effect of, he's like, I've left the best part of myself behind on that planet, and the news of his coffin has shaken me or something. So he knows because of this. So the Grissom finds the coffin, Enterprise finds out. So when he goes to earlier in the film when they land, and he's like, I was hoping to take the Enterprise back to Genesis. Well, because he wants to go see, and he wants to go get Spock's coffin, right? Like,
yeah.
But so there's a piece missing there. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. That's it's funny though. I was just letting it kind of wash over me last night, and I didn't.
Well, that's the beauty of it. You really don't think about it. You don't. You only think about it if you've seen the movie like 18 times, as I have.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think if I have a qualm with this movie, the Starfleet people are like kind of aggressively stupid.
How so?
Well, just there's sort of, it's kind of like Admiral Moore over here. He's like, all right, Jim, give me your gun and your badge. You're off the reservation, kind of thing. And and it's like Starfleet is exploratory, and they're sort of like, I think you can get to this story without making it like, oh, Captain Kirk and his crew are just smarter than everybody else. Makes them look like idiots. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, they're out there. You don't know what sort of forces they're up against out there, expecting everything to come back in one piece.
Here's the fundamental logic problem that I have is Kirk being like, okay, so Starfleet's not letting me go. I am therefore going anyway. Okay, that's fine. That's the hero maneuver. We get that. That's great. That's classic Kirk.
Mm-hmm.
But he then says, I'm going to now steal the USS Enterprise, the Federation flagship, from the most secure facility in the galaxy.
Yeah.
To go to the Genesis planet, as opposed to just booking passage on a freight, like somewhere. Like we kind of allude to it here. Like we have this scene with McCoy, and the guy is like, oh, Genesis forbidden or whatever, right? You guys could find a ship. You don't need the Enterprise.
Right.
Like if anything, it makes the Enterprise seem less impressive if it can be piloted by like 5 people.
That's yes. Right.
Right. Now, that all being said, I love the stealing the Enterprise sequence. I think it's a great caper.
Yes.
And it culminates in a great way. So I'm on board with all of that. I wonder if there was a better way to get that going. Like I think that, I don't know, maybe have the Enterprise not in space dock, or it's more visibly damaged and
under repair.
Right. It's something that makes it the best option.
They could be like, it's unfit for travel, and we wouldn't let you fly it anyway, Kirk. Or something like that. So it's like then they have to go steal it from some sort of repair yard or whatever.
Yeah, and I'm
also
sure
it is not working great. Maybe it's right. Like, ooh, maybe he was right. So it makes it even a little more dangerous as they're piloting it.
Yeah, I think so. And I'm sure budget played a role in that.
Sure. Oh, sure. Locations and
like, and even this sequence here, worth mentioning. I mean, it was originally as scripted. It was going to culminate in like a bar fight.
Mm-hmm.
And Leonard Nimoy was like, I just couldn't find a way to make it work. Like there was no logical way to get there.
It's funny because again, with this having to steal the Enterprise, that sounds good on a napkin. For ideas for Star Trek 3. So it's like you just jury rig it
Yeah.
to make it happen, and it's like you have to squint to your point, for it, but it's worth it because it's an interesting, fun idea. But yeah, it's funny with this. I can see it's like almost like the Star Wars cantina scene in sort of a way. And then it's like, well, yeah, a fight sounds great. Let's have a bar fight in a Star Trek movie, but if you can't get it there, you can't get it there.
Can't get it there. I do love, how can you be deaf with ears like that? DeForest Kelly's really fun in this one.
He's so good. I was also reading that they wanted to smoke out the bar a little bit to make it feel a little more mysterious, but that would screw up that digital video game that they show at the beginning. It would have made the job too hard for ILM.
That's so funny.
Do you think when they were doing that, I had to imagine that they were like, oh, just you saw that little dinky chess game they had in A New Hope? Wait till they get a load of this.
Right? See, I think that's so funny. I love that. I love his sticking his tongue out as he's trying to do the Vulcan neck pinch. That's so funny. Speaking of budget, this is another bugaboo I have where it's so clearly shot on a backlot or a soundstage.
All these outdoor, the Genesis planet.
Yeah, and they had, initially they were gonna do, Hawaii or whatever. And again, it's just budget, right? And that it always bugs me because it doesn't look great.
This what we're looking at right now definitely doesn't look good.
Yeah.
The cactuses with the snow and everything. I mean, it does look like the set of a 60s TV show.
That's right.
But there's something about the more jungle environments that
right.
They just have a surreal sort of feeling to them that doesn't bother me.
Yeah.
I don't know. Just because everything's unstable to begin with. So sometimes even in real life,
this
sky can look weird. Yeah.
That's not very damn funny. I don't know. This is, to your point, like you watch this movie for the relationships.
Yes.
Right. We get to see Kirk and McCoy banter. We get to, and the truth is that they did a good job of finding business for most of the secondary characters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It feels like they did a good job.
That's a challenge, right? Because one thing. This by the way, George Takei had a big issue with this scene here, where this guy calls Sulu tiny. He read the script. He's like, I don't like it. Sulu's not tiny. George Takei is this weird. I don't know. It's fascinating to me. He has a lot invested in how Sulu is, is he a captain or whatever? He's like, Sulu's not tiny. You can't say that to Sulu,
Mm-hmm.
And Harv Bennett's explaining, no, this guy's like a giant. Like, he stands tight. It's funny, the audience will love it. And then, of course, they filmed it. And when he says, don't call me tiny, the audience erupted.
Yeah.
It's a great moment. I'm sort of fascinated by that. I'm like, it's a great moment. How could you even, where's the upset here, Yeah,
you get a quip.
You get a quip, right? But going back to what I was saying, remember, Star Trek was originally not intended as an ensemble piece. It was initially a two-hander. It's William Shatner and Leonard Nimoy. And then just through sheer power of personality, DeForest Kelly ended up joining the opening credits. But everyone else was and the rest in the end credits.
See, that's funny because I only know it, collectively in the future. So that's fascinating to me.
It is, right? And so each of these movies, they had to find stuff for the secondary characters to do, and it was challenging,
Yeah, I bet.
Real quick, the voice of the turbo shaft, that's Leonard Nimoy.
Oh, funny. I didn't notice that.
And the Captain Styles, that's James B. Sicking, who actually just passed away just recently. He was, Doogie Howser's dad on Doogie Howser, MD.
It was driving me crazy last night. So I went and looked him up and I was like, oh, Doogie's dad, which I haven't seen that show since the 90s. But
right.
that guy, got into my
left
brain.
a mark.
Yeah.
So this sequence always bugs me because this guy is such a dick.
Dude, he's such a he's such a shit.
Right?
But he's good at it.
He's good at it. Maybe somebody like you's career is winding down.
Yeah, whoever they cast, he's perfect. And then you put him in the closet and he kind of stumbles backwards.
And then he just sits down.
Yeah, I like it.
So this scene, I mean, here's the thing, okay? If you, it's hard enough to believe that the Enterprise can be piloted by so few people. It's like, man, just put her on the Enterprise with them,
I was surprised. Yeah.
because she Nichelle Nichols gets the script. She's like, really? Like,
Yeah.
I don't even join the mission, you know?
Right.
Oh, by the way, real quick, this line, and I only know this because of Glenn Greenberg, where he says, "Have you lost your sense of reality?" He says, "This isn't reality. This is fantasy," which is a response to E.T.,
Oh, funny.
where it says, "This is reality, Greg."
Yeah, because he's like when the neighborhood kids are helping ET escape, one of them is like, "Well, can't you just his people just beam him up?"
Yep.
And then Elliot goes, "This is reality, Greg."
I wish his name was Greg. That would have really this isn't reality, Greg.
This is fantasy. I love that. That's a great response. And I'm sure in that moment, 2 years after what was like the biggest movie of all time, everyone probably had that fresh in their minds. That's great.
Look at Chekhov with that white collar, man. He just needs like a oversized lollipop, you know.
You're right. Yeah, little curls.
Yeah, my understanding is Walter Koenig was like, seriously, you're making me wear that?
That is hilarious. It's like his ex-wife was the costumer.
What's funny is if you watch the next movie, Chekhov is wearing like a leather jacket. So I'm sure he was like, yeah. I'm changing my clothes between movies, God damn it.
He's got like a chain wallet, like Ray-Bans. I love that.
I love scenes like this in movies where it's the thing where, Kirk is like, I have to do this, you don't. And they're all like, come on, let's go. Yes, we're ready. I love those types of scenes,
Yeah, it just makes it warms your heart because the stakes are present. These people could be put away for a long time, but damn it, they wouldn't miss it for the world.
Yeah, right.
This is for their friend.
For their friend. I love that.
Yeah. No, it's funny though. I had the same thought that you were just talking about where it's really that easy to steal the Enterprise.
Yeah, I get it because of budget and all this other stuff, but given what they're trying to do, the Enterprise itself was not a crucial, necessary thing. You know what I mean? Like let me put it this way: it's like, let's say you have a White House helicopter pilot who has to do something in Southeast Asia, so he decides to steal Marine One.
Right.
It doesn't make sense, right?
Yeah. You probably would go to a Han Solo type and try to license a ship or rent a ship.
But it's like, you get it because it's the Enterprise, right? So of course we got to have that.
And then blowing it up by the end is again a great napkin note. What if we blew up the Enterprise at the end of this thing?
Well, and that's so I was saying earlier, like Gene Roddenberry, he was effectively sidelined for Wrath of Khan, and although it's never been conclusively proven, but he leaked most likely. Oh, by the way, Miguel Ferrer right here.
Oh yeah.
How about that? This is a couple years before RoboCop.
Yeah, it's weird seeing him in such a small role. I expected him to play a bigger part because I recognized him.
I expected him to snort cocaine off of one of these crew members' chests.
Yeah,
that's as one does.
Right.
No, so basically it leaked to the fan media that Spock is going to die, and everyone's kind of like, all right, so probably Gene Roddenberry did it, right? Yeah, it's one of those things, and it didn't really affect the box office, all the consternation and whatnot. So it leaked to the fan press, hey, they're going to blow up the Enterprise, and I think they're all like, so Gene, huh? Yeah, probably.
Right.
And again, although I think the filmmakers wanted it to be a big surprise, and then it was like in the trailer.
Oh yeah, I watched the trailer after
the final voyage of the USS Enterprise, and they're like, God damn it!
I was shocked. Yeah.
Why would you put that in there?
Yeah. This is way unrelated, but I watched The Gods Must Be Crazy for the first time.
Oh wow!
This past week, it's about this tribe that doesn't know civilization, and a Coke bottle falls, down from an airplane, and they don't know what to make of it. So the guy wants to throw it off the edge of the earth. And so when it was over, I was watching the trailer, and in the trailer, it shows him getting rid of the bottle, throwing it off a cliff. And I was like, that's the end of the movie.
That's amazing.
It's like the whole thing is, will he get there? And in the trailer, they show the end of the movie. I was shocked.
So weird.
It's crazy when they do that. But I thought I had heard, especially with modern trailers, they're like, we don't care what we spoil. We need opening weekend.
That's
And
true.
if you show up because of that moment, we don't even care if it's ruined. If that gets you there, we did our job.
Oh, real quick here. First of all, the music in this sequence is terrific. It's a real opus by James Horner. But
amazing.
the whole as they're getting out of the space dock and just, I mean, really, he's just so good. But I love here where Captain Styles is like, Kirk, if you do this, you'll never sit in that chair again.
Mm-hmm.
And we get that moment for Kirk to react, because we know nothing means more to him than being in the captain's chair on the Enterprise.
Yep.
But that's our hero. That's what he does.
Yep.
It's
very, you feel it in your chest.
Yeah.
The stakes. Yeah. Just speaking about James Horner real quick, who obviously we adore. I was thinking while watching this movie, there was one particular scene I'm not recalling, but things weren't happening very fast. But the score was just making it seem like it was the most thrilling thing you ever saw. And I was like, incredible. I mean, because whatever James Horner does is inherently incredible. But it reminded me of Alan Silvestri and his task with Back to the Future. They told him, this isn't a huge special effects movie, but score it like it is. And it does. Everyone knows that score. Like, the tension in that movie is off the charts.
Yeah.
And a lot of that, I mean, great direction, acting, whatever, but like that score that Alan Silvestri does really, drives that movie home. And I was thinking that with this, what James Horner does with this film, which is not a very fast-paced movie, but it feels bombastic anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that the work he did in both this film and the prior film, they really connect. He created these wonderful motifs that play off each other. And it's such a crying shame he didn't come back for movie number 4. I suspect because he was doing Aliens at the same time, but also I think Leonard Nimoy wanted Leonard Rosenman. And so, the music for number 4 has always stuck out to me.
I need to watch it again. It's been a while.
Yeah, and the music is not bad. It's just not James Horner,
Yeah.
I think with regards to David Marcus, I think it was an interesting choice to leave out Carol Marcus, BB Besh, who, if in the previous film, they're a unit. The Genesis experiment was conducted by both of them. They're a team, Right. And other than, there's a brief mention at the very beginning, when the Klingons are watching the tape with they're using the same CGI footage from the previous one, but it's Kirk is like, the Genesis experiment, Carol and David Marcus, they leave her out. And I found that interesting because essentially the full blame for the flaw in Genesis is put on David.
Right.
And I think that's interesting because I was thinking like structurally, I kind of get it, because Genesis, the concept is so big that it kind of breaks the universe.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if this is a thing that if it's allowed to exist as it is and it works exactly as it's supposed to, you fundamentally changed everything. And I think the makers of Star Trek were kind of realizing that, like, we gotta unring this bell somehow.
I think it's really smart. When they were showing that, the CGI sort of thing that the Klingons were looking at of the planet being changed, I was thinking, I mean, if the moon is really that important to our gravity and the ocean tides or whatever, all these sorts of things, fundamentally changing a moon somewhere could just disrupt so many things. And I love then, because I honestly, I hadn't watched this in a while and I kind of forgot details about it. And then seeing that it's chaos.
Yep.
You know what I mean? You have cactus and snow. You have deserts and volcanic stuff and like what. I love that. It's like, it works, but it's not stable.
It's not stable, right? So David is kind of like he's like Oppenheimer, like he sort of created this thing. He doesn't fully understand the ramifications of it. Now, that being said, I think Harv Bennett would say David like meddled with nature or whatever, and therefore he had to die. Like, that's like the dramatic arc. And I'm like, I don't know that he deserved to die.
Well, I think because I can understand that. as on paper, but he's not a maniacal person. He wasn't
Exactly.
consequences
Right.
be damned. This is for innovation. Like that's a person who
Yeah.
has to die at the end of the film.
Right. I think exactly that. I mean, I think it allows for a great moment for Kirk, obviously.
Yes.
But it's like I think giving Kirk I mean, I don't know. I'm saying this as a dad now. Like maybe this didn't affect me as much when I was a kid.
No, I actually, even in watching it, I thought it was a perfect choice because it's he gets to make up for a mistake that he did. So he's doing something. We see him go out heroically, and of course, it's a huge motivating factor for our main character.
Yeah,
his son dying. I mean, it just completely makes sense.
Yeah, it's. I think that the way in which they arrive at it's sort of like you're doing movie math, right? And you're like, okay, well, he says I'm going to kill one of the prisoners, and you got Spock. Well, obviously Spock isn't going to die.
Yeah.
So then it's between Saavik and David, and it's like, well, who's more expendable?
Sure, and we'll have more impact, honestly.
That's true
on more people. Sorry, Saavik.
Sorry, Saavik 2.0.
Yeah. But I was reading somewhere, I guess in the novelization of the movie, Saavik and David Marcus were romantically involved.
Was that in the novel?
It's just something I read somewhere, but something else that was dropped, I guess, was Saavik becoming pregnant with Spock's child.
Yes, so that was definitely something that was present in some stage by the time they got to the fourth one.
Okay, so that would have been post ceremony at the end of the movie.
Well, so I mean, she does the Ponfar ceremony with Spock, which is a mating ritual.
Is that what that is? The hand thing?
It's like foreplay.
It felt very like romantic or erotic or something to me, and I was.
Yeah.
I mean, he was still kind of a teenager at that point, so I was.
Yeah. So it's creepy in that regard.
It was weird. I didn't know. At first, I thought she was just doing some sort of thing to calm him down. Well, I mean, I guess she is, but yeah.
The Ponfar is sort of like Vulcan males go into heat, basically, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it happens every 7 years upon maturity, right? So that would put him, if she says it is here now, right? She's like, it's starting. That means he's like 14,
right?
So yeah, creepy.
It is kind of an interesting bit of business to give him that he's going through some sort of like growth development, like puberty.
Yeah. So that's that goes back to an episode of the show, where it's been 7 years and he has to get back to Vulcan. It's an episode called Amok Time. And so it's a callback to that. So I think it's one of those things where if they didn't acknowledge it, then people would be like that would be sort of a gap in canon,
Yeah, that would have been kind of funny in that show if the way that they introduced it was, it's just normal business at the beginning, but they open a door and Spock is like humping furniture. And they're like, what's up with Spock? And then like in the cafeteria, he's like kind of like humping like a thing that's holding like cafeteria trays. And they're like, all right, we got to ask you, Spock.
Spock, like, I mean, my God.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. He's like, oh, well, of course, it's been 7 years and I'm in heat. Like, oh, well, yeah, we've got to get you back to your planet.
Yeah, if not for broadcast standards and practices back then, they would have indulged that a little more.
That makes a lot more sense, what she was doing with the hand thing now. Again, it felt romantic.
Yeah.
But I wasn't sure what to make of it, so that's interesting.
Yeah, so in the fourth film, which I'm assuming we'll get to, Saavik is in the early part of the movie, but she doesn't go with them on the mission.
Mm-hmm.
Or she doesn't go with them as they return. She stays behind on Vulcan, and it wasn't outright stated in the dialogue, but it was heavily implied that she was pregnant.
Got it.
But that's not in the movie at all, so it's not,
right.
And the character's never seen again after the fourth movie, so it doesn't really matter. Although Robin Curtis, she appeared on an episode of The Next Generation as a like a mercenary of some kind or whatever. So
That's cool.
that's kind of the great thing about being in Star Trek.
Yeah.
If you're able to hopefully find a niche and just kind of play different roles.
Yeah.
Leonard Nimoy as a director, by the way, worth mentioning. I mean, he really did open the door for Star Trek actors to find a second line.
Yeah.
As directors, because Nimoy, of course, he did this film. It ended up being very successful. He did the next one, which was even more successful. I mean, for a while, it was the most successful Star Trek movie ever made, and that's what led to the Next Generation happening and everything else. And then Jonathan Frakes, who Commander Riker on the Next Generation. I mean, he has made a very admirable career for himself directing movies and TV, for the last 30 plus years,
Yeah. Yeah. That's great.
Yeah. Jonathan Frakes, LeVar Burton, Roxanne Biggs, like all these people who were Star Trek cast members have gone on to become directors. And it was Leonard Nimoy who shone the light,
Wow. And it going so well too, it probably helped.
Real quick, this right here, I just want to say, when David's like, somebody's out there, give me your phaser, I'm going to go stop them, or whatever he says. See, again, this doesn't make sense to me, because David Marcus is a scientist. Savick is a Starfleet officer.
Right. Sure.
Right. So she should be the one going, but for antiquated, gender norm notions,
Yeah, you should stay here and be safe. I'll take
right. I mean, in terms of their specific functions, it doesn't make sense.
Right.
Sorry, you were saying.
No. No. Just when we were talking about directors and cast getting to direct in the future, I mean, that this was a successful experiment.
Yeah.
I'm sure it had a lot to do with it.
And of course, William Shatner ended up directing the 5th movie as a result of Leonard Nimoy doing the 3rd and 4th one.
Yeah.
He was contractually able to do it because they have. It's really interesting. Leonard Nimoy and William Shatner had a favored nation clause written into their Star Trek contracts. So whatever he got, he gets. Whatever if Shatner got a Buick, Nimoy got a Buick, and so they could sort of play good cop, bad cop whenever they would negotiate, because they would both end up getting the same stuff,
Right.
So Smart. When it came time, so after the 4th movie, Leonard Nimoy tells Shatner, "Hey, thanks to the favored nation thing, you can probably direct a movie too."
Yeah.
And then he does what's generally considered the worst ones of those first 6. So
isn't that funny? I know that. Like, I just probably because of you, but like,
I would love to watch that with you. I think that would be heck of fun.
I don't know that I've ever seen that one. There was one that I said I hadn't seen, and Sean's like, yeah, no, we watched that together, and I was like, oh, and I don't remember which one it was.
How funny? Probably First Contact.
Maybe.
Yeah, that's the Next Generation one.
Is this the one version of Spock? There was one actor where I was like, holy cow, he looks like Leonard Nimoy.
Probably the one after this.
Maybe the one after it. Yeah, I mean, it's just the facial structure and the eyes and the brow, and it's incredible.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting. All the screaming that Spock does, that's Frank Welker.
Yeah, that's crazy. I saw that later. You know what's funny? I feel, and I don't know why, but when I was a kid, I think I had the read-along book of this.
Oh, how funny.
And I kind of, because, it'll be like a narrator, but then they'll play snippets from the movie. So it's almost like you're seeing a narrator walk through the movie. And I remember the Spock screams, and I remember not liking it. Like, it was very uncomfortable listening to as a child.
Blame Frank Welker.
Yeah.
AKA Dr. Claw.
That's incredible.
And like every other cartoon voice ever, basically. But
yeah.
Today I went with Dr. Claw.
Dr. Claw.
I'll get you next time, Gadget.
Well, that's pretty good.
Thanks.
We got Frank Welker on the line here.
And he also does a lot of animals too, right? Like he does Santa's Little Helper and just, I mean, anytime there's like an animal, basically.
Anytime it's, that's usually Frank Welker. Yeah.
Amazing.
So John Larroquette was doing Night Court at the time of this movie.
Oh, really? I didn't realize it was that old.
Yeah, because Night Court started in I want to say 83.
Wow. Wow.
No, I'm wrong. Sorry, 84.
Still, I mean, to me that was like a late '80s show, probably because of syndication or something.
So Night Court was airing when this movie came out, but he had probably filmed it before it started working on it. But it's very funny because it's such a non-Lara Kett role. Like, it's not particularly showy, you know?
Yeah. What his persona would become is not related to this at all. That sort of slimy, smarmy, but totally lovable, watchable guy.
Yeah, I mean, certainly among the Klingons in this movie, he's the most sort of sensible.
Yes, yeah.
Officer Malt, as Lara Kett himself said, first name Chocolate.
That's funny. Yeah, this looks a little bit more like a set, but
yeah, and again, it's like from a budget perspective, I totally get it. But I've said out of all the 6 original series movies, this one is the most TV looking.
Yeah, sure,
right,
sure,
and it's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, it is what it is, and Star Trek was TV, so that's fine. But I think if I were to guess, it was a victim of obviously Leonard Nimoy being, this is his first movie out to shoot, so let's limit variables, and shooting on location creates a whole lot of variables.
Yeah. I saw that, well, you mentioned that they had suggested Hawaii for the more tropical looking areas, and I saw Red Rock Canyon came up for Vulcan, and I was like, yeah, that might have been nice. Because even Vulcan looked a little flat.
Yep.
But, do what you do. And you know what? The ideas are strong enough. The story's strong enough. It was still a hit.
That's, I think what it really shows is how that Star Trek audience is loyal, man.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when you think about it, I mean, they cranked these movies out like clockwork every couple of years, and the folks showed up.
Yep.
Right? Like the fourth one expanded the audience, obviously, because it played to people. It didn't need just the Star Trek audience, because funny is funny. But the Trekkies, they kept the fires lit.
Totally. Yeah, the fourth one's interesting because a lot of it takes place in modern times on Earth. It's like a good little gateway to try to hook your friends who aren't Star Trek fans.
That's right.
Now come watch this with me. It'll be fun. And then you get them to introduce to the characters. It's not alienating, no pun intended. Wait, so okay, I didn't know this, but or correct me if I'm wrong, but apparently this is where Klingon is like formally introduced as an actual viable language you can speak.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? Isn't that something? So yeah. So in the motion picture, that was the very first time. First of all, that was the first time we saw Klingons that look like this, with the bumpy heads and the ridges and stuff.
So wait, what were they in the TV series?
So in the TV series, you painted actors in swarthy tones and slicked their hair forward, and you're like, that's a Klingon.
Ah, okay.
Right. And so the motion picture, suddenly you got big studio money behind it, and they're like, well, the Klingons are going to look like this now. And I think the idea was like, well, they've always looked like this. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. You know what I mean? And in that movie, the Klingons speak, but they're like, they're doing that basically, and like, hey, they're speaking Klingon.
Right.
So I think with this one, they hired a linguist named Mark Ockrand, who actually created a fully functional, real language that is spoken to this day by weird, nerdy people.
Well, of course, I know one word. Thanks to The Simpsons, Garduck.
Yeah, I mean, there's a Klingon dictionary. There's, in the sixth film, right, you have Christopher Plummer as the Klingon general who speaks Klingon. And they actually like translated, Shakespeare into Klingon so that he could speak Shakespearean Klingon.
Amazing. I mean, we get kind of used to it. There's like Elven and things like that these days now. And it's like, oh yeah, people do this. But that's incredible.
Yeah.
Right? Just making up a new language whole cloth. I mean, that's incredible.
Let's pour one out for Krug's space dog, by the way.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
That's what really sends him over the line.
Now, is this also the introduction of this style ship? This sort
It
of
was, yeah.
Klingon-looking ship?
That's amazing. Yeah, yeah. So this is a Klingon bird of prey, which has had a hell of an afterlife because it appears in this film, the next. Let's see, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 features a Klingon bird of prey.
Mm-hmm.
Plus multiple appearances on the Next Generation, and yeah, it started here. But it's meant to be slightly smaller, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it fall. I mean, it looks like it's of the same family as the Klingon warships that we see in the previous films and in the old television show. But yeah, it's a new design, and it's a beautiful design. It's so iconic in its own right.
I agree, and it's aggressive looking, but it does look functional.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
See, so this whole sequence here again, the logic part of my brain is like, well, a starship of this size should not be able to function with like 5 people on board. I don't care how smart Scotty is.
Right. Sure.
Right? Like I think it lessens the impact of scenes in earlier films where you've just got crew members here and that, like all of that. Why do we need all those people then? You know,
Right.
And you can
right.
Right? Oh well, they weren't planning to go into battle, or whatever. Yeah, but it's just running the ship,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because to me, it's like a seafaring ship, like the HMS Surprise from Master and Commander. If
Right.
it's just Russell Crowe and Paul Bettany and Ensign Ricky and Ensign Billy running the ship, it wouldn't make sense.
Right.
Well, that's the Enterprise is supposed to be the equivalent of a seafaring vessel,
It's funny now, if I were to do it, I would almost say like he runs some sort of like AI program that does general functions, but then we would have him running around the ship the whole
Right.
time, having to flip this, having to do that. And it's like very difficult.
That's exactly something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, like this is a bad idea,
Yeah. Like, can you do it? I think so.
Yeah.
Kind of a thing. Make it a little trickier.
And I mean, to their credit, I mean, they say, "Oh, we weren't expecting to take her into battle." Okay, that's fair.
Yeah.
But again, I would say just running the ship should be very, very hard with this few people.
Yeah, agreed.
And meanwhile, Uhura's chilling out on Vulcan, dude. Like,
I know. And then she and that jerk ass guy in the closet, like learn about each other's pasts, and they have more in common than they realized, and a friendship is forged. Like,
see, I was thinking it'd be funny to have a running subplot of her just trying to get to Vulcan. She keeps missing her train, and like they lose her luggage. We're just cut back and forth, like Uhura's at the customer service office, like just we got to give her something to do.
That's really funny. But this is. Look, I love action and I love spectacles, but this is all about tension.
Mm-hmm.
Just this character tension, and it's just it's a standoff, and it's amazing what they're able to wring out of this and make me feel. And I leave unclenching as if I had just watched an action sequence. And I feel like for me, that's what the Star Trek movies bring and what I enjoy about them.
Yeah, I think that Kirk is at his best when he is the most vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, obviously there's the image of the indomitable space hero, but like for me, what sticks with me is at the end of Star Trek 2 when he's trying to reach Spock and they're separated by that glass, and it's just so heartbreaking,
Mm-hmm.
And then this here, Kirk, like he is completely powerless to do anything. He has no idea. Like, imagine, he has no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm about to kill one of the prisoners. Click. What's going on? What's going on?
Yeah.
And he receives the worst possible news.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
I do like that he goes for Savick, and gets like a heroic moment.
Mm-hmm. I agree. I mean, he's so completely outmatched. Like it's
Yeah.
Like his number was up the minute he engaged the guy,
It did make me think also, where we've come in terms of fight sequences in movies. Like this just looks like a scrap, just kind of two dudes true. Like rolling around on the ground. But it's like now everybody knows Kung Fu in every movie, every fight is this.
Look at this right here. Look at how he misses the seat.
I felt that last night.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's this. I love, Leonard Nimoy talked about this, where he he basically he had everybody clear the set, and he just sits down with William Shatner. He's just like, I can't tell you how to play this.
Yeah.
Like, you have to find it. Whatever lane you find, you have to do it.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like, it's interesting because that's the benefit of being an actor and a director, right?
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Like, it's such a personal process of however you play it, and the way his voice breaks. He says, "You Klingon bastard, you killed my son." I mean, it's Kirk at his most vulnerable. But what's so great about this character, and what makes him resonate, is and we see the line that McCoy says, right? He says, what you had to do, what you always do, turn death into a fighting chance to live." Right? It's like, no matter the odds, he finds a way, something.
Yep. The best kind of characters.
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny because there is the cliche of Captain Kirk, of like, oh, he's the guy who's always fighting people and screwing the chicks and
Yeah.
all the green chicks, and that's not borne out by the show or the movies, not really.
Sure. That just becomes the shorthand for parody.
That's the shorthand. Yeah, but the fact is, he's consistently depicted as a thinker. And that's what makes him a great captain. He's able to outmaneuver, not by using his fists, but by strategizing, right? And they say that's how you get to be a starship captain.
Right.
I
love that. I had a thought and I lost it, but we'll see if it comes
I'm sorry.
No. Everything you're saying was great. It inspired something, so we'll see if it comes back. But yeah, no, just going back to it. I mean, great characters that come up with great ideas. Like this, I was trying to think about it last night, like put it into words, what I felt, how Star Trek movies differentiated themselves from others. And I was thinking, there's spectacular ideas versus spectacular spectacle.
That's great.
And I feel like maybe this is a lesser movie when it comes to all of them. I don't know, but I was really invested. And this is how I know I'm watching a good movie also. When someone dies in a movie, if I'm watching John Wick and 10 people get shot and I'm not thinking about it, fine, whatever. But like when I'm watching a movie and his son just died and I'm thinking, like, I'm not even thinking about the movie anymore. I'm like, his son is gone, like forever, because of this jackass. And like, and then I'm really thinking about it as if it's real. That's when a movie's got me.
I think that's such a good point.
And I really felt that from the story, but also from his acting, him missing the chair, falling over. Like
that was a great choice.
Great choice. Yeah.
So the destruct sequence here is almost verbatim what was used on the television series.
Oh, interesting.
In an episode, so they carried that over. But I love how James Horner's music starts very subtly, and then it starts taking more prominence as he says, "Destruct, 0, 0, 0."
So good.
I mean, this whole sequence, the way he orchestrated, you have to look at it, you're like, man, it's pretty smart.
So smart. Although I might have given myself more than 60 seconds, but yeah, like, but no, it's brilliant. Yeah. It's so satisfying.
And the way these Klingons are such stupid goddamn idiots.
Yeah. Yeah. He's like, all I hear is a voice. Here's what it's saying. Self-destruct in 5 seconds.
You know what that means? These humans,
even though they're speaking English. Yeah. It's so great, though. It's great, but again, spectacular idea.
It is, and definitely like I like how you said it. It's on your beat sheet. Like, okay, how about we blow up the Enterprise? I mean, it's an iconic moment,
And if you can do that in some sort of moment of sacrifice, of course, but what if it wasn't just sacrificing the ship? It's also a really clever life-saving moment for a calculating captain.
Right. Yeah.
Chef's kiss.
So perfect.
Right.
It's the only thing speaking. And as soon as Christopher Lloyd hears it,
You know, he's like, you know, that great Christopher voice. Yeah, get out of there.
it's so funny.
It's great though, but it's. I'm trying to think of other examples, but it's really impactful seeing something that you know and love, iconic looking, be destroyed.
Yeah.
You're like, where do we go from here? The stakes feel completely. You know,
I mean, especially right there where you just see the name, just kind of crumble away.
Yep. It's a great explosion too, right?
It is, and then the music here, right here, as our crew are watching, and again, I just think it's where Kirk is just like, what have I done, right?
Yes, my God, what have I done?
Yeah.
Beautiful. This is beautiful. Watching it almost like it's a shooting star or a comet, and this, dollying and getting all the reactions.
And Bones, and Bones is his conscience, right? Like that's,
yes,
it's like he knows what he had to do, right? But he needs to hear it.
Yep.
Given everything that ship means to him.
This is gorgeous. I mean, beautiful to look at, but just all of it. This is a great moment.
Yeah, and so by the time we get to this sequence, I don't mind the soundstageness of it, because it's become much more sort of like a Fantasia,
Exactly. It's eerie. And like I was saying earlier, I mean, when the calm before a storm or especially a tornado or something, the sky looks surreal. It's eerie. It's otherworldly. So this feels like that. Yeah, I remember finding this all very haunting as a child. Spock screaming like this.
You're just listening to an audio tape of screaming.
Yes, exactly. And I think it's probably a still of him like.
Is that the one you were saying? That he looks like Leonard Nimoy right there.
He does. It might have been the one actually, whoever it was in line when they were about to kill someone.
Okay.
Something about the structure of his face and everything. You're like, wow, that looks like Leonard Nimoy. But all this stuff, even in older films, and I know we can do amazing things now with computers, but when you're seeing rocks jut out of the ground, and the world dynamics just changing in front of your eyes, even though it's a set, it's someone pushing that thing, like there's just something cool and dynamic about it to me.
I agree with that, yeah. So William Shatner has told the story about how, they were filming this. He was on the lot filming this, and then, he was done for the day or whatever. And then I guess a fire broke out on the lot, and he realized like the Genesis planet sets were going to burn down. Right. Because this fire was spreading. So he's like wearing his Captain Kirk suit, and he's grabbing a fire hose, trying to help put, because he's like, he's almost done with his scheduled shooting, and he has to go start, whatever the new season of TJ Hooker.
Right.
And if this gets delayed, it's going to screw that up. And so,
he's like pitching in just to make sure he can get out of there.
Basically.
I was reading somewhere that the DP, I think it was saying when he heard about the fires, he was like, "Oh, well, if they destroy the sets, maybe we can go shoot on a better location."
Go to Hawaii.
Yeah. So funny. But yeah, then apparently, sets were damaged and they had to use black curtains to prevent light from leaking in just to finish the movie.
Yeah, and I think they had hoped for kind of a more elaborate, visually exciting final battle between Kirk and Krug. Mm-hmm. And those plans ended up getting kiboshed, so we get something more of like a standard, Kirk fight.
Sure.
I think their plan had been like, as the planet is sort of reconfiguring, you have these boulders coming up out of the ground, and they're sort of jumping from boulder to boulder, and it just wasn't working.
Yeah,
and that's the dilemma is when you're working with limited resources, you have to go to war with the army you have.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. It worked for me. And then maybe watching it all these years later, I am looking at it as an older movie. And
but I mean, it's never taken me out of it,
Yeah.
I really love this. Again, Kirk, he's always thinking like, how do I strategize this? Right? Okay, we got to get Kirk off the planet. We got to get Spock off the planet. So he's like, hey, beam us up.
Mhm,
You know?
mhm. Yeah. I love how many cold lines they give. Was it Krug? Is that what it is?
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, there's the one line that's so interesting where he's like, Kirk is like, "Give me a minute." He's like, "I'll give you 2."
Yes,
I love that. Actually, that's sort of what I was texting you before we got on the
I
air.
got it. I got the
Yeah,
reference.
because Zachy was like, "Give me 5 minutes" through text, and I was like, "I'll give you 6."
I
But
have to say, this is the first time I heard the phrase "c'est la vie,"
yeah, oh yeah, sure.
and it's part of my vernacular solely because of Star Trek III: The Search for Spock. So
Isn't that funny where that happens? Certain turns of phrase, you get them from films, and you, for the rest of your life, associate them with those movies. But I love the cold line. It's not here yet, but when Krug is going to beam some of the people aboard, and he's like, "Well, what about the Vulcan?" And he's like, "No, why? Because you wish it."
because you wish it.
Cold. That's like one of the coldest lines I've ever heard.
Dude, can I tell you something? I say that to my kids all the time. I'm not even playing. I'm not lying. Like, Baba, can we do this? No, we can't. Why not? Because you wish it.
I love that. That is a cold badass line. Yeah. And even, I mean, you got to give it to Lloyd. It's a great line, but like Lloyd's delivery, like, because you wish it, amazing.
I also love this, that Kirk obviously heard him say in Klingon, like, Maltz, activate beam.
Mm.
And he remembers it enough to say it.
Yes.
To get himself off.
Yes. Very clever. You know what's funny? I'll be honest. I don't know that I picked up on that last night. And now I'm wondering, I would have done a close-up of Kirk, like eyes darting or something.
Ah, yeah, sure.
But yeah. Yeah, I love it. This is just so good too. Yeah, this planet's unstable. It's like, yes, exhilarating, isn't it? I love that. That's a great villain who's just not showing any fear. Like,
just implacable.
If we die, we die. And you're like, well, how are you going to square off against a guy like that?
And this scene feels very much a response to the fact that Kirk and Khan never meet face to face.
Sure.
So I'm pretty sure Shatner, that was his list of demands. Like, I want a fist fight.
Yeah,
that's
a great move there. That little gymnast move.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of interesting, right? Because obviously Leonard Nimoy gets involved early on as a director, and it kind of changes the whole power dynamic on the set, I would think. Like, if you're William Shatner and you're used to being number one on the call sheet, and now number two is above you, I wonder how that played out. I'm sure there was some awkwardness.
Yeah. No, I bet. Yeah, this is, I don't know. It's just great ideas. This planet, and then an unstable planet, and you're stuck on it, and you're fighting this villain, and I don't know. Just love it.
Yeah, I'm with you.
I'm looking at it now. Yeah. Oh, yeah. This is great. Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
So here's one thing that has always bugged me about this.
Yeah.
And it is the rhythm of how he says, I have had enough of you. You know what I mean? I kid you not. As long as I've been alive and seen this movie, he wouldn't say it that way. He'd say, I've had enough of you, right? Like,
well, one would think.
I've never been on a planet that's disintegrating and somebody's pulling me into to lava. But I'm just saying, I don't know. I can do this on this, but that's something that has always bugged me. The rhythm of how he says that.
Do you think it's almost like a Christopher Walken school of acting, where it's like it's inherently interesting if I do it in a way you don't expect?
Hey, maybe.
I don't know.
I mean, hey, look, man. William Shatner has had a career that is continuing even to this day in his 90s.
Yeah.
So, what the hell do I know?
That's really funny. True. 90. But see, all this stuff, I mean, I'm sure these are models and whatever, but like, it's so visceral looking. I mean, just seeing these rocks and detritus and crap burst into the air and slow, like, it just feels palpable and dangerous to me.
Well, I feel like they found the right way in terms of scale of how to depict it, because as you said, I mean, these days we'd have a tendency to go overblown with it, and you don't need
Yeah.
to. You don't need to. You know what I mean? Like, we get it.
And it probably wouldn't feel like it's actually there. Like we would buy it because of the reality we're living in for 2 hours, but our
Mhm.
brains do have a small disconnect.
That's right. Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, I totally agree.
Is this? Yeah.
I do not deserve to live.
Yeah. Fine. I'll kill you later. Yeah, I don't get tired of these shots. I like watching all this stuff, all these rocks and explosions.
Yeah, like I said, it's very much, you can tell it's them trying to put the Genesis genie back in the bottle. Be like, no, this isn't something we can keep going back to. You know,
Makes sense.
you know, in the 2009 movie, this is something that always bugged me, where one of the plot points involves, you know, you may not remember, but you know, Kirk and old Leonard Nimoy Spock are on that ice planet,
Mm-hmm.
and they meet Scotty, who's like been marooned there, and Scotty invents this thing called transwarp beaming,
Okay.
so that he's able to beam them onto the Enterprise, which is in warp, God knows how far away.
Right.
Right, and it's a convenient plot point because it gets our heroes where they need to be. But that's one of those universe breaking things for me, right?
Mm.
Where I'm like, if transwarp beaming exists, if you can beam people under those circumstances, then there are no limitations.
Right. Right.
Like, anything goes at that point, right?
Right. Right. Now you can just teleport anywhere you like under any circumstance.
Basically, you can be from planet to planet. Why do we need starships, you know?
Right. Right. Right.
So, you know, that you can understand how even in a fictional world, you have to somehow manage. It has to be something you can kind of get your arms around, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
This scene, by the way, I want to mention, Leonard Nimoy talked about how difficult it was directing this scene because he's in it and he has his eyes closed.
Mm.
So he couldn't see what DeForest Kelley was doing.
Oh, that's funny. What a funny thing.
Yeah. And DeForest Kelley talked about how I could feel him trying to direct me through his eyelids.
That's really funny. Or if he makes a choice and you see the eyelid flutter a little bit, like, well, he didn't like that.
That's right. You know?
Yeah, it's funny.
But it's a great moment for McCoy, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I love that. He's like, I don't think I could stand to lose you again. Like, these two guys who are always at odds and always bickering, but it's like, boy, they need each other, you know?
Yeah, he's the perfect person to put his consciousness into.
Exactly.
Because he's the exact last person you would expect to have to have Spock in his mind.
That's right.
And you see her now. Maybe they did cut all those scenes of her in some sort of planes, trains, and automobile situation. So it'd be funny if she had like hay, you know, on her shoulders and like a suitcase.
She has a tie wrapped around, tied around her forehead.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
We get Edie McClurg. She's like, "Well, you're effed."
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. But she has pointy ears, like she's an alien.
Yeah, exactly. She's like. It is interesting, you know. Obviously, at the start of this discussion, we were talking about Star Wars and how, you know, during the 80s, Star Trek and Star Wars were kind of like, it was like this pseudo rivalry, you know.
Sure, yeah.
And your point is so well stated. Like, they were in completely unique neighborhoods, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's like a bridge between them, which I guess is the word star.
Sure, yeah.
I mean, they're doing very different things. They have very different mission statements, you know?
Well, and you can imagine too, I mean, for a casual audience member like me, if I was older in that time, it's a space adventure. So you kind of expect to get the same thing, and they're different. And maybe at the time I could see certain people just being like, well, this isn't the thing I came for. But now when I'm older, I appreciate that it's different.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good point, you know? I mean, I say this often, especially with regards to the next generation, which is much more of from the jump, that was an ensemble piece.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so Patrick Stewart is head of the ensemble. But, you know, I enjoy putting on Star Trek, whatever kind of Star Trek, because I call it competence porn.
Yeah.
It's like the joy of it is you get to spend whatever 45, 50 minutes with these characters who they get along, they like each other, they're good at their job, and they get stuff done.
Yeah, they're put in
And they're
impossible situations and they work together and they're all smart
yes,
and they smart their way out of trouble.
that's exactly it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And because I think about my own relationship with this franchise, and it's like I've been a Star Trek fan virtually my whole life.
Right.
And I think about that. I'm like, how, because I remember the first movie. I saw the first movie first, and it bored the piss out of me.
Sure.
And I remember very distinctly because I knew William Shatner from T.J. Hooker.
Funny.
So watching that first movie, my brother was like, "Oh, that's Captain Hooker." See, they're calling him Captain Hooker.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, sure.
Funny.
I realized my brother was kind of a dick when but I remember I watched Star Trek 4, then 2, then 3.
Yeah.
So watching this one, I already knew going in, well, the Enterprise is going to get destroyed and David is going to die.
Mm.
But I always say, like, I liked 4. I liked it a lot. But I watched Star Trek 2. That was what made me a lifelong fan.
I can see that. I mean, I never saw 2 till you showed it to me.
Wow.
Yeah, I saw 4. Star Trek was always my dad's thing. It was, you have those shows, your dad's watching something in the living room, so you're like, oh, I'm going to go play in the other room. And for somehow I got into MASH, which I hear is the opposite story for a lot of people. But yeah, Star Trek, I was just like, okay, that's dad's show. I'm going to go over here. And so I do remember going to the theater, though, for 4 and loving it.
Interesting.
So that was what made me go, oh, okay, so Star Trek's not so bad.
Not so bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I remember in summer of '89 was when Star Trek 5 came out.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the one and only one of the original 6 I got to see in the theater.
Mm.
And this is mere weeks before, of course, that other summer of '89 movie.
Batman?
Maybe that's the one. But that had not come out yet.
Yeah.
So,
I was just thinking, I was like, wow, Batman, Last Crusade. I mean, that's like...
There was a few. Yeah, I think Last Crusade was
summer.
already in theaters.
Oh, I see.
That was a great summer. But yeah, Star Trek 5, me and my brother went. And so that, like I was mentioning how that's like the worst one. I'll always have a soft spot for that because I got to see that in the theater with my brother.
Totally.
And it's a special experience for me.
Yeah. I read that, ironically, that this might be the only location shooting they did. The big staircase was at Occidental College.
Right.
But it's funny because then they mask literally everything else about the natural location.
It's so funny.
Yeah.
This is Dame Judith Anderson.
I remember that credit at the opening.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with her work beyond this film, to be honest, but she was very well regarded, obviously, and she was cast specifically because Leonard Nimoy in the first Star Trek film, there's like this Vulcan, priestess or whatever, and I guess he ended up not thinking she did a good job, and she was just kind of this old lady, and so he was like, well, if we're going to cast a Vulcan priestess, it should be a dame. It should be somebody, who's big and theatrical. And so he went to her, and she was virtually retired by this time. But what I found interesting is, I guess that there was earlier before this process starts, she says this procedure is fraught with danger, whatever she says. And then, McCoy says, I choose the danger. Right. I guess as written, it was, this procedure is very risky. And he says, I'm willing to risk it or something like that. And I guess she read the script and she called either Harv Bennett or Leonard Nimoy. He's like, what if she says danger? Highlight that. And so they went with that. I was like, what an interesting thing I wouldn't have thought of that,
I didn't know that. And that line really impacted me. Hearing like this, I mean, it really did make me think, what would I do? Like if I've got this guy died, you know what I mean? He chose to sacrifice himself, but I happen to carry this thing inside that could bring him back, but it could be very dangerous to me.
Yeah.
It really makes it heroic, verbalizing it that way.
Well, and when McCoy is saying, I choose the danger.
Yeah. What exactly. A line. Yeah.
You know, the other thing I was thinking is like a sequence like the one we just saw, the ceremony.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to write. It's hard to stage.
Oh yeah, this could come across so either silly or
Right? Like I was thinking about that. I was like, you got to get it from the page to the stage. How do you do that?
yeah, and with your limitations,
Yep.
you know. By the way, I should say, I was saying that line was great and heroic. That I'll choose the danger, but then doesn't he also add something like, "Yeah, ask me now,"
Yeah.
like in the middle of the ceremony.
Which is very in character.
Yeah.
So when you think about it, DeForest Kelley had kind of like by this stage of his career, he was essentially retired, right? So he'd just pop up every couple of years to do a Star Trek movie, but other than that, he was just chilling, and he'd show up at conventions.
Hmm.
And the nice thing is, by virtue of being third build, like he was part of the trifecta, so he was always going to have something meaty to do in these movies.
Right.
Right. So he didn't have to deal with the angst of the other actors who were probably madly flipping through the script to see their character's name.
Yeah, counting how many lines they have.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Is
Because
Spock?
even
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
no, go ahead.
No, this is a change of topic. Go ahead.
Well, it's in Star Trek Generations, which is the transitional. That's the first Next Generation movie, but it has Kirk and a couple of the other original cast members. They originally wrote it for Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, and Leonard Nimoy was like, "No thanks, I'm not interested." DeForest Kelley was like, "No thanks, I'm not interested." And so, Scotty and Chekhov, they just slotted them in.
Right.
So they'll take whatever they were happy to take the job, I would guess.
Yeah.
Sorry, you were saying?
No. Actually, I answered my own question in my mind. I was looking at what he's wearing here, and it resembles sort of what he wears in 4, which I think is more like a
That's
robe.
Right.
But it's not this same outfit, right?
It's in the same vein. I don't know if it's identical.
Yeah. I love this. This is a very patient scene. But it's catharsis after all of this.
Catharsis for the audience too.
Yeah, and seeing him taking the time to have him look at every single crew member here, these people who he's been on so many missions with, and slowly get it back. It's just very satisfying. But I admire
I think it'd be funny
patience.
if he opens his mouth and he's like, "What's all this then?" And like for something and they screwed up and he has like a Cockney accent and nobody realized that. I don't know. And that's Spock now for the rest of the series.
Kirk's like, "We're stuck with this."
All right then. Sounds like Keira Knightley for some reason.
Yes, I was gonna say I haven't heard your Keira Knightley in a very long time.
Now, really, when you think about it, like this is not like OG Spock. This is Spock 2.0. This is a clone.
Yeah, right.
We don't really think about that, but yeah, I mean, it's not him.
Right. What is all transferred over? I mean, is it in their lore? I mean, is it his soul? Is it all his memories? Bones said it was his marbles, right? Whatever that means.
So the way it's described, I think in the script, the Katra is all that is not the body.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So there's this notion in Vulcan society that the intellect and the emotion too, because that's part of it. If it's not, Vulcans suppress their emotions, but they're not without emotions, right?
Mm-hmm.
So all of that is preserved, and that's why he says you needed to bring back his body so that we could take his Katra and preserve it. And in the 2009 film, you probably wouldn't remember this. Remember Vulcan gets destroyed in that movie?
Yeah.
And Spock, he goes deep into the planet to get his parents out, and they're inside something called the Katric Ark, and that's where all the souls are preserved, basically. So,
I don't remember that. I remember the destruction, but that's it.
Yeah, remember Winona Ryder's the mom?
I do, yeah.
So that's a progression from this. I mean, when you think about it, the Katra is just an invention of Star Trek 3. We need to write our way out of Spock being dead. Okay, how about this thing, right? And then you're like, no, but that's the mythology, right? And I'm always like for people who get so twisted into pretzels about, oh, this violates canon and this, that, and the other thing, it's like, bro, it's all fiction. It was
Yeah.
all, it didn't exist until somebody made it up.
Yeah. Yeah.
That means you can make up a way out of it too.
Yeah. But
Right?
it feels like it belongs in the universe. I can see when something just feels completely out of step,
Sure. I agree with that.
with the logic of the universe. But to me, this feels sort of like an elegant extension of something that was already there.
I absolutely agree.
Yeah.
That's a whole lot of Spocks that they had there. What was that, like 6 actors?
Yeah. Yeah. Some other thing I saw in trivia, and I kind of noticed this time, was that after the Katra ritual, they had the male actors had 5 o'clock shadow, just to imply that it was a long ritual. And
Oh, interesting.
I was like, I like that. It's just thinking,
Subtle.
Yeah, subtle.
Yeah. I didn't even notice that, to be honest.
I only did this time because of reading that.
So what do you think about this movie? Where does it sit in the Star Trek hierarchy for you?
I mean, I'm really only familiar with 2, 3, and 4.
Sure.
And I would say, yeah, I might put this one for me in third position, but
Yeah.
I like those movies. Like, they fall under movies I like. So,
There you go.
Like 2 is 2 and a classic, obviously, and 4 is a lot of fun and maybe appeals to me in that way. Seeing fish out of water, kind of situations, and science fiction melded together in the real world, which is a huge thing for me. But
yeah,
I was invested the entire way. I keep saying it, but great ideas, and great ideas are intriguing and fun to watch and feel like action sequences when they're done well, just because they're so tense and the stakes are so high. And so I think this movie succeeds with that. And so I like it.
Yeah, I think for me it's not hard to see why it performed well, because I think it does the job of getting you elegantly from a very emotional, satisfying ending of the previous film to, okay, but we got to bring Spock back, right? And I think that's really, for me, when I think, this in my mind, this is something I think about a lot, where its characters are killed off in fiction. And I always say, well, I'm fine with bringing him back if they can do it the right way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sort of my baseline for that is Star Trek 3. Because we know what they're doing. They're trying to bring Spock back, but we enjoy the journey they go on, and it's taking us to a place that we want to end up, because as fans, well, yes, we want Spock back.
Yeah, right.
And that's the like I said, Leonard Nimoy continued to play Spock until virtually the last few years of his life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? I mean, think about it. He made his final appearance as Spock in 2013.
Wow.
And he died 2 years later.
Wow.
And that and at no point, I don't think, we're fans like, oh, why did they bring him back? It ruined the end of Wrath of Khan.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Right. And so I always, with any impactful character death, if you can do it the right way, we're not going to care how you did it.
Totally.
Exactly. But one thing I will say is this sort of became a de facto trilogy. I think the fans call it the Genesis trilogy, which I kind of like. And it works as Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. So really, I guess what I'm saying is I'm really looking forward to hopping back on in a couple years and finishing out this trilogy.
Yeah, no, man, me too. Because I like 4. I've seen it a couple times, but these aren't movies I go back to frequently like other films.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's still sort of fun and surprising when I get to watch them.
Well, there we go. Hey, let us know your thoughts on Star Trek 3: The Search for Spock. I know this film it has a reputation that fluctuates, so I'm genuinely curious what our listeners think of the movie, and of course what we had to say about the movie. And if you have any questions or comments for us, you can email us at moviefilmpodcast@gmail.com. You can also hit like on our Facebook page, facebook.com/moviefilmpodcast, and message us there. As always, please go to Apple Podcasts and leave a review, leave a star rating. Let us know how we're doing. Every little bit helps. And with that, on behalf of my partner Brian Hall, my name is Zaki Hassan. This has been our commentary for Star Trek 3: The Search for Spock. Thanks, everybody. We'll catch you next time.
Bye.